With that, I will conclude and hand it over to Wayne. Wayne, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being online, and I look forward to your questions. And please feel free to ask questions on anything. There's no question that doesn't make sense. This is a crazy, crazy time in the DMS world right now, and so I want to address as many things as possible. There's a lot of acquisitions that have gone on where we've had the Brookfield Group has bought out CDK and taken them private. You've got the management changes at the Reynolds company. You've got new players on the market. Techion and TBS has really improved its product. Dealer-Built has improved their product. And then you've got the also Automate being rolled into the Solera group. So we'll try to address all of those today. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in Q&A and I'll address them. This is kind of a little bio of my background. I've been doing this for a very long period of time. I have approximately 1,300 clients. Been very lucky to have some great people in the car business use my services, and I really enjoy what I do. So I'm going to keep doing it for a while. I think the most important thing is, as most of you know in the dealership world, the DMS system and the ancillary products that go with it are probably some of your highest expense items. And so we want to kind of address those. We want to let you know what how to best figure, if you're thinking about changing systems, how to figure those costs involved, and also the best way to try to negotiate a best contract as well as terms and conditions. One of the things that I always let people know, anytime you change a system from one DMS to another, there's a first year lost productivity, and it's based on the number of employees you have by a certain amount of money until they get used to dealing with that system, dealing with that vendor, understanding the changes in the system from the previous DMS system. And so that cost to change, I've given you 4 different choices. Surprisingly, we'll address that at the end. I'll let you pick and choose what you think it is on the cost to change, but you definitely have to consider it.
Those in the audience, please go ahead and make a selection there, what you think that cost per employee is, and then we'll close the poll.
Surprisingly, if you've picked, it's pretty much, and I've kind of, every time I do a conversion where somebody's changing systems, I factor this in. But your lost productivity is about $750 per employee for the first year only on lost productivity, not knowing who to call, not knowing how to do this situation, which they've done in the past, in their sleep. So if you have 100 employees, you can factor in $75,000 that 1,000 employees are going to be $75,000 lost productivity for the first year. And so I would definitely take that into consideration. We'll start with our 2 greatest market share vendors. Both CDK and Reynolds control about 70% of the market, give or take a percentage one way or the other. I'll talk a little bit about both of these customers and these vendors. The pros and cons of CDK. The pros of CDK, for a long time, they've had a great insight into the DMS world. They brought out a lot of engagement with a lot of the consolidators that got in early adapters with CDK, and they've had that luxury for a long period of time. They were recently purchased by the Brookfield Group 16 months ago, roughly. And they're, the products that they have, some of the products that I think are outstanding is they have a world-class archiving system. They're very good on centralized accounting. Their payroll system where they pay the taxes. Once the people get used to that, they love that. It's very hard to wean people off of that. But I think the biggest changes in CDK recently have been with the changes in the concepts of the new group taking over. They've immediately taken the company private. a lot of what I call highly specialized skill people, the CAM people, a lot of those people have been either their jobs removed or they've been replaced with people, and mainly because I think a lot of it has to do with just the cost that these people were earning. But a lot of the large groups have starting to, and I have a IT 20 group that we meet twice a year, and a lot of them are very large groups that have they're about half of them are CDK clients, and they're very used to these CAM people. They call them their CAM associates, being the specialist on having to navigate around the CDK software. A lot of those people are now gone, so the level of support has dropped off. CDK has also taken a lot of their support. They're taking it off-site and outsourcing it, which I think is a negative. They've gotten very inflexible on contract terms and contract lengths. And the other thing that they've done in the past 4 or 5 years, they've had a lack of really acquisitions of any new robust products that are revenue generators, with the exception of the acquisition of Roadster 3 or 4 years ago. Everything else has either been a bust or they haven't even acquired anything that has been helped them generate additional revenues. I've been a long-time CDK supporter, having worked for CDK for a long period of time, and I think they've stumbled a little bit recently in some of their support issues, and it's caused them to lose some of their very long foothold clients in the marketplace. A lot of the clients even today are getting immense delays on, even though you're an existing CDK client, to get a new proposal. The delays on getting a new proposal are almost ridiculous, and I think that's really hurt them in the marketplace, and it's also fostered the existing dealership to look out elsewhere to other people in the marketplace as a possible DMS solution. They've had price increases, pretty substantial price increases, and especially if you're not under contract or not under a NDA, national non-standard addendum protection, you're getting hit with price increases as much as 8.5%. So I think that's one of the things that has put a little turmoil in the marketplace and has a lot of people starting to look, because as all of you know that are car dealers, when you get backed into a corner, you don't like to have to make a decision without having time to evaluate it and analyze it. And what you're getting now is a lot of things, take it or leave it, from CDK, and that's unfortunately not the correct direction to go. If I take R&R, when Bob Brockman bought the company 8 or 10 years ago, they had a similar approach to what CDK has now, take it or leave it. And then since the passing of Bob Brockman and the rolling in of a whole completely new management regime, Reynolds and Reynolds has taken a completely different approach. They've done a 360 approach, or 180 approach, excuse me, to turning around the marketplace, and they're starting to be much more flexible in their contracts. They're starting to be more flexible on the length of the contracts. They're a lot more flexible on the NSA, non-standard addendum terms and conditions. I think that's been great for the marketplace. Their support level has been excellent. It's not outsourced. Everything is kept in-house. There are a lot of long-term employees that are very familiar with the rental system. About 3 years ago, they did a complete application rewrite to streamline and minimize some of the steps needed, and it's really been a big plus. But the other thing they've done in the marketplace, they've gone out and done some very good acquisitions. They bought the product called DocuPad, which is an automated closing tool, and being able to basically do your contracts online, and a lot of flexibility, and everything being indexed immediately into the archiving system. They bought a product from the Hendricks Group called Add-on Auto, which is an accessory product that is outstanding. It's very unique to the marketplace. And as you guys know, as car dealers, the average person, when he buys a car in the first 90 days, is going to spend $600 to $700 on accessories. Well, if I can keep that in the dealership, and put it under the financing tool, it just makes more money for the dealership. So it's an excellent product. They also bought a service lane kiosk called GoMoto, which has been an excellent product. And they've made a recent acquisition to a new product that is not out yet, but is coming out. And it's called, it's a replacement for the vAuto product, which many of you use. And I think it'll be interesting. It'll be very price competitive, and it'll show a lot of flexibility in the marketplace. They've been very aggressive on going after competitive business. And I think that's very prevalent in the marketplace right now, that most of the CDK clients are looking at either rentals or some of the other vendors, which we'll also address. Two other vendors in the marketplace are Dealertrack and Automate. Dealertrack, a Cox company. Many of you have vAuto, you have XTime, you have Auto Trader, VIN Solutions. Those are all Cox products, and they've worked very well in the marketplace with all the vendors. I think the one thing with Dealertrack is their price wise have been very competitive in the marketplace, and that's been a great tool for getting them the business in the marketplace. About a year and a half ago, they did away with the payroll system, so now you have to go outside and also get a third-party payroll when you get the Dealertrack system, which has cost them a little bit of that advantage on a price side because of the third-party cost and involvement. So I think that's been a little bit of a negative. I think from a standpoint of Dealertrack, they're going to have to, at some point in time, either buy another system or do a major rewrite to kind of update some of their product, the current DMS product that they have today, and try to streamline a lot of the interfaces on how they work today. So I think that's something that's coming down the road. But a lot of people use it. It works well. It's doesn't have all the bells and whistles of CDK or Rentals, but very close. And you're using some of their third-party products like XTime, a service lane product. It's an excellent product. VIN Solutions for CRM, vAuto for inventory, car inventory management. Those products have a tremendous foothold in the marketplace today. Automate, another big impact client. These would be the next two, probably be controlling another 10 to 12% of the marketplace between Dealertrack and Automate. Automate also has a very robust CRM system. They now have centralized accounting, where in the past they didn't have that product. So it's allowed them now to handle larger groups. Their support is excellent. They also have a CRM system called DealerSocket that works in concert with Automate. And so I think those are products that you have to make a consideration when you're looking at Automate. And then some of the new players on the block are Tekion. Tekion is of California, is a brand new DMS provider. Probably has one of the best accounting packages I've ever seen, a great reporting tool. They have a couple gaps in fixed operations. Unfortunately, they've had some recent layoffs. They've just gone through their second major layoff, and I think they're running into a little bit of a cash issue, which has to be a concern because they're not all completely dealer certified for TCS in every area. And so that's going to require some additional cash. So I think there's a good possibility that someone will look at Tekion and possibly buy it. But the product from the front end is very stable, and it's getting better and better in fixed operations. If I'm a big parts wholesaler, Tekion would have a problem meeting my needs, but in most cases, it does all the basics that most of the dealerships need. Another player is PBS. PBS, very excellent accounting package, very excellent reporting tool. Has really strengthened their fixed operations to a point now that it's a completely new animal, and they had some gaps there before, but I think it's really done a good job. They're starting to take inroads into larger dealer groups where they were mainly in the past 1 and 2 store deals. Now they're into 8 and 10 store deals. Again, though, I would be careful if I have a very robust wholesale parts business. They will have a little bit of a trouble adjusting to it. The third player is Dealerbilt out of the Dallas area. Very robust accounting package, very robust reporting tool, very easy to use, kind of a Microsoft type friendly working operating system. And so I would definitely consider looking at them when you're considering DMS providers. They have, again, some very big players in the marketplace now, and they've made some inroads in fixed operations, which has been a very important part of the business in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think that's really moved them up the ladder a little bit. So these are players you have to look at when you're doing your evaluation. I think it's important to understand when you're doing evaluation of possibly making a change. What I do is I normally come on site and I look at exactly your processes and see which vendor is the best fit for your processes. In addition, I do a billing assessment, as I mentioned it here on the slide, to evaluate your current DMS system, what you're paying for, are you using it? Do you have areas of third-party overlap? Am I outsourcing stuff that maybe I could bring in-house and not have to pay an integration fee? And all those things come into play when I do an evaluation.
Wayne, this is Doug. Can I ask you a question, if I might?
Sure.
When we engage with clients, we typically do a spend analysis. We get a lot of spend data from the previous 12 months from those clients. And it's my sense that we see an awful lot of overlap. So, and what I'm trying to say is that dealers are buying functionality from CDK or Reynolds or whomever the case may be, but then they're also buying that same functionality from some other bolt-on. Do you see that a lot?
I see it, Doug. It's amazing. I see it a lot. And that's one of the reasons why it's very important to do an on-site evaluation, because a lot of times when I'm looking at a bill and I'm looking at the applications you're running, and then I go on site and I take a look, and like, I'll give you a classic example. I had a client in the Southwest that has been paying for the last 3.5 years for a product called ERO, which was electronic repair order, where the work is dispatched through the service drive. And when I went on site, I noticed that he's been paying ERO price for the past 3.5 years. When I got to his dealership, I walked out into the service bays and I noticed that there was no terminals in the service bays. Well, you can't run ERO with the technicians without them having service bays. But they've been paying for it on the bill, and no one's ever caught it. So what we went back to the vendor, and the vendor was very kind and understanding that they had dropped the ball, and they gave the client a credit back for 3.5 years of billing. It's a very expensive credit, but they did give it to them. But that's not something I would have caught just looking at the bill. That's why it's very important to either have an internal person look at the applications and do an on-site audit, or have a consultant do an on-site audit. Very important.
Thank you.
And then you have to evaluate, are you using all the applications you're paying for? A lot of times what you have is you have you have a turnover in, say, sales department. It's not unusual to see a dealership paying for 2 or 3 CRM systems at the same time, as every new sales VP or sales manager that comes in wants to have his CRM and doesn't drop the other one, or can't get out of that contract, but he thinks he can make more money by having this CRM. So it's real important to evaluate to make sure you drop existing client vendors if you're using a new application either with your vendor or with another third party. And then the third part is the pricing versus the market. I think the one thing that's real important is the market is constantly changing. I'm not smarter than your controllers or IT people, but I get to see the pricing in the marketplace. And so that allows me to see, based on the size of your dealership group, how many locations you have, what the pricing should be for that market and what you should be paying. So at the time now when everybody is very conscious of expenses, these are important 3 steps that has to be done. Doesn't have to be done with a consultant. Can be done internally as long as you have somebody that understands the applications and what the applications do. So I would highly recommend doing this. That's kind of an overview, and I'd be happy to answer and address any questions you have concerning the marketplace.
All right. Everyone, you can go ahead and type in questions via the Q&A button. That's at the bottom of your screen. There's a chat button there too, but the content-related things are Q&A, so please type something in there for Wayne. Well, let's see. I have something right here. Let's start with this. What is the best length of term for a DMS contract?
Yeah, I think a great question. I think most of the time in the past, most of the contracts that the dealerships I see have been 60-month contracts. In today's marketplace, I try to make contracts a little bit shorter, 36 months to 48 months. That's not to say that if we hit one out of the park where we really have a great price, we have great pricing protections, we have great non-standard addendum protections, that I wouldn't go 60 months. But I would say most of my clients in the marketplace today are looking at 36 to 48 months for a couple of reasons. Number one, it gives you a lot of flexibility of changes in the marketplace. It also gives you, if for some reason your dealership is bought out and you don't have it's not by the buying person is not of the same vendor using a DMS system, somebody was going to have to pay off that contract. And so keeping it as short as possible minimizes your overall risk of out of pocket and your net after selling your dealership. So I would definitely consider 36 months, 48 is fine, 60 if I absolutely negotiated a world-class contract. Anything longer than that, I'd probably stay away from.
And this is Doug. I've got another question for you relative to, you mentioned before that one of the things you see is some personnel in the dealership will bring on new functions and not shut off the other ones. And we've seen that not only on the DMS side, but we see it in utilities and with other suppliers. And I think part of that problem is that there can be a fair amount of management turnover in these dealerships that, you know, and they like to bring their favorite supplier in or one that they have confidence in. My question to you is, who is normally making DMS and then ancillary DMS system decisions in a dealership? Who's making that call?
Well, it kind of used to be under the controller, the CFO, but I think now dealership owners have gotten more and more involved because they're realizing the total concept of the cost of that contract over the term life of the contract. So I'm seeing more and more dealers involved, CFOs involved. And I think one of the things that most of my clients do, and I think from just me browbeating them on doing this, is making it that if somebody, if I have a new sales manager that wants a certain CRM system, we want to make sure before we buy a new CRM system, we want to make sure what our term of the existing CRM system we have. Can we get out of it? And more importantly, do we drop? Well, we want to make sure that if we put the new one in, we make sure we drop this so that we're not paying on two of them. So I think that's very important to maintain not only on CRM, but any applications. If I'm using it's time for the service lane, or if I'm using, some texting products, I want to make sure that I'm not paying for that already on my DMS side, or that I drop it. And most of my contracts with the vendors has the ability to drop a certain percentage of it without a penalty. So very important on that non-standard addendum. It's almost as important as negotiating the price, is to make sure the terms and conditions of that contract are also thought out for the next 3 to 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
I had a great question someone sent up on what do I think about Autosoft. I think the Autosoft product is very good. It handles smaller dealerships fine. It has some gaps in fixed operations, and I'm a very fixed operations guy. I want things to be as seamless as possible without duplication of entry, and I think some of that stuff has to be done with Autosoft. But I have clients that have been on Autosoft for quite a while, and as long as you don't get too many dealerships, they can handle the smaller single point or 2-store deals without any problem. And as long as you're willing to sacrifice a little bit in some of the flexibility in fixed operations, your product works fine and it's cost effective. I also have a question is, what is your thoughts on to throw a low ball number at them for a 10-year period? That's an unusual question. I hadn't thought about that. I would say that would not be a game plan that I would go by. Number one, a lot of some of the vendors that would do that, you're going to get impacted. They're not going to just roll over on a low ball number for a 10-year contract. That's not going to happen. I think the other thing I would tell you is you've got to factor in the cost of price increases during that period of time, and sometimes that might be cost ineffective because those price increases for the next 5 years are on top of price increases you already had for 5 years. So I think you have to be a little bit careful. I would say 66 months would be about the longest I would go. I've done a couple contracts recently where there have been some vendors changing, and we've negotiated some 3 months to help with the adaptation of the change, and we've extended the contract out. So whether it's a 63-month contract with 3 months free or a 66-month contract with 6 months free, that would be about the length I would go. I would stay away from anything longer than that.
Wayne, this is Doug again. I encourage our sourcing team here to try to lock pricing whenever we can, whatever the commodity or service or product is, for as long a period of time as we can, and then try to secure minimal cost increases over time. So for instance, a uniform contract, it might be 3 years fixed pricing with a modest increase for year 4 and 5. Are you able to do that in the DMS space? Can you lock pricing for a long period of time, or how does that normally work?
Yeah, with a great question. With CDK, you used to be able to lock in no price increase for 3 years, and then we would cap the remaining 2 years of a 60-month contract at 5% or CPI, whichever is less. That doesn't exist anymore right now with CDK. CDK has gone to a CPI +3 contract, and in some areas you can negotiate CPI +1 depending on the size of your dealership group. So right now you're probably looking at 7 to 8% price increase depending on where CPI is. Some of the other clients, Dealertrack, Dealer Built, Reynolds, they will do a flat CPI. You can negotiate in that contract some free, maybe a year or 2 free now, but they've also, again, all of them have kind of ratcheted down a little bit and gotten a little tighter. But I think a fair number is Consumer Price Index. If you get in 12 or 24 months free on a new contract, and let's say you did a 60-month contract and you got 2 years free, then you're tied to the price increase of 3 years at CPI. That's probably fair in the marketplace because the vendor has to be able to make sure he makes enough money to get the quality people that you want to deal with on a regular basis. So I think that's important. But the days of the 3-year no price increase and then capped it that CDK used to offer are long gone.
One of the other things that we do, Wayne, is try to audit suppliers and audit their invoices. In fact, we hire you to audit our clients. How important is it to audit DMS invoices? And if it is important, how often do you recommend that be done?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the greatest mistakes that dealership make is not auditing that bill on a yearly basis. And when I'm talking about auditing, I'm not talking about just looking at the bill and say, well, that looks about right. I'm talking about going to each department manager and saying, okay, my service department is running a appointment schedule. Are we using it? Are we using service online tablets? Are we using that? Item by item, application by application, every at a minimum of once a year. I'd like to do it bi-yearly, but once a year for sure. I want to do it, and I want to take the existing bill, and I want to go with the managers and say, are we using this? One of the areas that jumps up all the time that I see, that I usually catch every time I go in, is a lot of the vendors sell service pricing guides with their system. But then again, your people use outside service pricing guides like ALLDATA or Mitchell's or any of those products. So sometimes they need them because of used cars and stuff, but a lot of times they don't even use the existing service pricing guides with your DMS provider. And you could be paying anywhere from $400 to $700 a month. That could be gone away because you're already paying for a third-party service pricing guide. So I think it's a great question, Doug. It's something that dealerships don't do. And I think with what's coming down the road on interest rates going up, and you're going to have to monitor those expenses a lot more closer. And I think everybody's got to jump on the board and start to audit that on a worst case, a yearly basis.
Doug, again, you just brought up a good point, Wayne. I think that as a spend management company, we're always concerned that is the stated or contract price the price that's being invoiced, and is that accurate? But you're taking it deeper, and it makes sense. Are we really using the applications? Which really goes back to the redundancy issue that we talked about earlier, right? So, yeah, good point. So look at audit for price, but also make sure that the application is correct and not redundant.
Yeah. I just got a question from a Lee, and he says we currently use dealership. I'm thinking he meant dealer built. It is by far the cheaper system. However, functionality is way behind other DMS providers. Do you have a figure for the cost of functionality? I think one of the things that you have to look at is, where is the strength of your dealership? If your dealership strength is in fixed operations, and depending on what products I'm using from dealer built or dealer track, am I using Xtime? Do I have those products, or am I just using the existing DMS system? I think your functionality cost of ownership would be for that department $300 to $400 per employee if he's having to do duplication of entry and duplication of work minimum. And the problem there is you don't just get to carry that over a 12-month period, because normally when you change systems in 12 months, at the end of 12 months, people have gotten used to the vendor, they've gotten used to the new system, and the functionality raises back up. But if I have a functionality problem because my DMS provider doesn't have the products that are robust enough for me to use them, and I have to do third-party input or I have to do manual input, that cost goes for the life of the contract. So I would be very careful, and I would evaluate, what areas am I having to do duplication of entry, and can I make that a little bit more user-friendly?
Reminding people that they can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Several people have, and we appreciate that. Here's another. What is an NSA, a non-standard addendum, and how important is it?
Probably the most important thing, second to the price. Non-standard addendum is basically all the things that you have suffered in your last contract that you want protection against on your next contract. I want to basically control my price increases, when they happen, and how much they happen by. I want to control the ability to drop items without being penalized, so I can drop a percentage of my bill without being penalized. I want to make sure that I have in writing that if I buy another store, I get to put it on at the same price. I want to make sure all my contracts are, this is probably the most important thing that I run into. I want to make sure that all my contracts are coterminous with the original contract, because what the vendors a lot of times want to do is they want to basically get you in a straddle position where you're having contracts end at different times. So if you decide to leave them, you've got to pay them a liability on that contract that's outside of the original contract. So that NSA basically protects the dealer in all the things that he suffered through in his last dealership base. And, my NSA in most cases will be 25 to 30 items that will address him and where the dealer's protected. I had a client of mine call me the other day, and they're an existing client, and they got a price increase that was well beyond what we already had in the NSA. We just sent them a copy of the NSA and they issued the credit on it. So it's very important, probably as important as the price, but definitely a very close second if you don't think so, but a very close second to the price negotiations.
This is Doug again, Wayne. I would suspect that you recommend that NSA regardless of who the supplier is, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you don't know. I don't want a handshake from my sales guy because he might not be there at the end of 5 years or 4 years or 3 years, whatever the term is. I might have a dealership like CDK that gets bought out. And then if I didn't have the NSA in place, a lot of my clients that are locked into a 5% cap would now be getting 7 and 8% increases with CDK on their new billing price increase issue. So that NSA is very important with any dealer that you do business with, any dealer vendor that you do business with.
Advice, and that advice, I think, could pertain to any contract that any dealers are thinking about today. You can put an addendum on a uniform contract or credit card contract, to do the same kind of thing. So good advice, Wayne.
Yeah, I have clients that when they buy third-party CRMs, we put a non-standard addendum together for that. And, you have to be careful because a lot of times the CRM contracts are shorter term than the DMS. And if they're a third party, because we want to keep those as short as possible because it's easy to renew them. And if you have a turmoil and you have to change, you don't want to be caught with a huge liability of having to get out of a contract.
Your point about the coterminous agreements is well taken too. A lot of dealerships have decentralized purchasing. They allow their management team to negotiate contracts, and they all have different end dates. And it's important, if you want to control your destiny, to make sure that somebody steps in and negotiates a coterminous package for all of those agreements so that you're not held hostage. So that's great advice.
Yeah, I'll give you one of the. It used to be they're still in existence, but they're under the Reynolds umbrella now. But there used to be a company called Universal Computers, UCS, and a lot of times when a parts manager would buy a new parts cataloging system from them, that would automatically trigger a new contract for the same term starting from the day he bought that new terminal. And I've had a lot of times where people say, well, my contract is done in a year. And I'll look at the paperwork and say, you just had an automatic renewal. You've got another 6 years on your contract. So it's very important that you make it and it be in writing that all contracts, no matter who they're with, whether it's dealer built, dealer track, CDK, Reynolds and Reynolds, PBS, any contracts done with those companies are coterminous to the original agreement. That's very important to put in.
Advice.
Here's one. What is my total cost of contract ownership?
Great question. I think one of the things that you have to look at, you have to take a look at what is my upfront money? What do I spend? What is my monthly? And you take your monthly and you annualize it on for the length of the term of the contract. And then when you do that, you also have to factor in the price increases. And so if you have fixed price increases, you know exactly what they're going to be. Let's say it's going to be 5%. You can factor that in. But if it's CPI, like right now, I just did one for a client. CPI +3. It was going to be, for one vendor was going to be 7% a year, and for the other vendor was going to be 4%. So you have to factor that in, and then I'm going to change. And if I'm going to change, and let's say I have 100 employees, and I use like $750 per employee, that's $75,000 I've got to pull in to my cost of ownership to make that change. So you have to put all those things into play. And then I have now a final number where we can evaluate. And in this case, this was an existing client of mine that has been with the vendor for 30 years and decided he was going to change. And when he changed system, even with the cost of ownership, his savings was going to be over $750,000 over a 5-year period. So it was a substantial lot of money because that's net dollars spent.
And when a dealer has a contract, a DMS contract that's coming up for termination, and they start looking at other providers, and oftentimes they engage you to help them do that, and that's a smart thing to do. But how realistic is it for a dealer to bring that up to the current DMS provider and use that as leverage to move? How successful will that dealer be in maybe reducing price increases or mitigating price or reducing existing prices or mitigating price increases in the future? Does that happen?
It used to be a little bit a chance to happen, not anymore. What you would do is you could point out the fact that I'm going to look at another vendor and I want to get a proposal from you, and you've got to be more competitive. And so your new proposal from them might be a less amount, or there might be some applications that you're paying for that you're not using that we would take away, and it would get a reduction on that. But I think from just going to them and saying, I want to reduce my contract, a lot of times that just doesn't happen unless you have a clause like in your NSA. If most of my clients have the ability to drop 25% of their bill. So if I'm paying $10,000 a month, I can drop $2,500 of my bill without any penalty. I think, that's important again to that NSA. It comes back to that NSA. That's your chance of getting competitive from that standpoint. But as far as getting a price reduction, just because you're thinking about changing, they're going to want to basically do a new proposal, and they're going to want to look at probably extending some term to give you that reduction.
Okay. And Wayne, I've got one last question for you, and then I'm going to be quiet because I've been talking too much here. If somebody wants to investigate a new DMS system, what kind of time does it require you? What's that elapsed time look like? Is that a 30-day process, a 6-month process? What do you normally recommend?
You want to start, if you're not sure you're going to stay with your existing vendor, you want to start 13 months out. And the reason that's important is you don't want to get caught into being a squeeze by the existing vendor as you get closer to the end of contract date. So you want to start at about 13 months out. You want to do your due diligence on checking the systems, going through demos, not letting the existing vendor tell you this is how they do the system. You want them to show you this is how they do, because a lot of times what happens is, and I really encourage, when you have a demo, you get your fixed operations managers and sales managers. We segment the demos at certain times so that each one of them can make their meetings so they can see this is how we currently do a write-up of a contract today with XY vendor. This is the new vendor. Show us how yours works. So they can see it and they can get a good feel that, hey, I understand there's going to be probably some terminology change and there might be some different actions, but I can basically do my job maybe in less steps with this new vendor, and you can see it as opposed to the vendor telling you that's how they do it. Because a lot of times they're telling you what's coming down the road, and if for some reason the vendor doesn't get his allocations for research of expanding the applications or rewriting the applications, the product might not come, and you've made a decision based on that feature functionality that's not available. So you have to see it today in the marketplace. I also tell vendors, don't tell me anything that you're going to do in the future. Show me everything that you're doing today. And anything that comes in the future is gravy, but anything that you're doing today, I want to show me how that works. And I think that's important.
Good advice. Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, Wayne. So, Doug, why don't you go ahead and activate your webcam, and we'll get ready to bring up the post-session survey in just a few moments.
I have to say I think I'm a pretty good purchasing and spend management guy, but I learned a boatload from you today, Wayne, and we can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise and your advice in this session. So thank you for your time, and for all the folks on the call or on the webinar today, I'd certainly encourage you to reach out to him. This is the consummate expert in the marketplace today. We can get you in contact with Wayne, or you can reach out to him directly, but I'd encourage you to do that. We'll have copies of this webinar presentation available on the Strategic Source website tomorrow. I would also encourage you, if you're not a client of ours and have some expense concerns, you want to improve profitability, we would be happy to talk to you about options that we have available to assist. We don't know it all, but I think we've got a pretty good team that can help you. So reach out to us at 612-386-3898 or sales@strategicsource.com. Thanks everybody for attending today, and keep an eye out for other innovative supplier webinars. We tend to run about every 2 weeks. So thank you. David?
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, Wayne. Very informative session and great questions. I'm bringing up now the post-session survey. You spent almost an hour with us. We'd love to get your feedback on the time, as your feedback helps make these sessions as good as they can be. Thanks, everyone, for attending today, and we look forward to you joining us on future webinars with Strategic Source.